Okay, so this is an introduction to org mode circa mid-2018. Um, and this will not be going over all of the features in org mode and won't go over very many features in Emacs either. Primarily, this is dedicated to org mode, which is something that was written for Emacs, and we'll give you a brief overview of some of the features that I use at this time in org mode. So first of all, Emacs is a open source and free of cost text editor, although it has a great number of features beyond what you would expect from a normal text editor. It pretty much has everything bolted on that you could think of, including Tetris, which you wouldn't think would typically be in a text editor, but this has it. Um, Org mode is a modified way for Emacs to behave to handle plain text data in a more useful way to organize your life. Org mode is bundled with recent versions of Emacs. So if you download Emacs and it's a recent version, you will have org mode automatically. Like I said, I'm not going to be going over all of the features in org mode, just the ones that I use at this time. There's a great many more features in org mode, and some of them you may find really cool. So I would highly recommend you read the org mode compact guide, which I'm going to reference in a minute, and that will just start at the beginning and look over the table of contents, and it'll give you an understanding of what features are out there, and you may discover something I haven't covered that interests you. So first of all, why use org mode? Well, it costs nothing, and it's free software, and that is awesome. It runs on multiple operating systems. It's been around for decades and could be around indefinitely. So it's a good editor to learn for life. Being open source, no one can simply decide they're no longer interested in writing it, so it's unlikely that it'll go away anytime soon. Unlike maybe other note-taking applications, services, or editors. Another great thing is that the data stays in plain text, so there's no vendor lock-in. Everything that org mode and Emacs is doing is simply interpreting that plain text in special ways, but the data always remains in plain text. Org mode's just a powerful interpreter. Org mode also has features my previous note-taking tool doesn't have, such as archiving old notes out of my file or to a different part of my file. The ability to do time tracking directly in the note-taking application, giving summarization reports of the time tracking. There's several features around to-do list items. There's collapsible headings, which is an enormous feature as far as its usefulness. Easily rearrangeable item lists, whether those are ordered with numbers or unordered lists, such as the one we're looking at now, which has bullets or asterisks for each one of the headings, and a lot more. So there are other features I don't use, but you might. I'm not going to show you the weekly agendas, which you can pull up, or the calendar feature, which shows you your to-do list items spread across this week, and what's coming up, what the deadlines are, what's scheduled, because you can schedule to-do list items. I'm not going to show capturing, the version control system integration, or Tetris, along with a great many other features which are in Emacs. So first of all, if you'd like to get started with Emacs org mode. Let's cover that now. So, like I said, a recent but not the latest version of org mode is bundled in Emacs. This version is fine. If you really want to, you could upgrade it. There's, of course, bug fixes and new features all the time. To get org mode, just download Emacs. So there is the address. I'm not going to spell it out. You could also use your favorite search engine to find a copy of Emacs at gnu.org. And that is that. So I've done a couple things. I've used a couple features of Emacs while we've been talking that I didn't explain or point out. So we need to start diving into those now. Your file is organized as an outline. I have mine organized as an unordered outline. That is, it uses these bullets or asterisks, and you can see that top level headings are in one color. The next level headings are indented and in another color, and that continues. You can indent as much as you want, and the color keeps changing. But you can, there's a lot of content actually in this file that we're not seeing yet. And for organization purposes, it's hidden from us, which makes it nice to work in a file that has a lot of information. So we can have a file, you could have a file for maybe your work life, maybe your home life, maybe projects, maybe for a knowledge base. You could have it all in one file, however you want. But once you have Emacs installed, all you need to do is create a file, and it could just be like notes.org. And the .org extension will cause Emacs to, when it opens the file, open it in org mode. You'll also see at the bottom of the window on the gray bar, it will say org, and so then you know you're in org mode. And then you can use all the features of org mode. So your data is organized into an outline, and you can fold up or collapse each one of the headings that make up your outline, whether that's collapsing a top level heading, a second level heading, third level heading, etc. When you have a heading that has nothing underneath it, like we see our cursor is now on the line that says top level heading with no subcontent. There's nothing underneath that heading or that line, and so we don't see anything under it. Now, the next line is top level heading with subcontent. Now, we don't see any of that subcontent, but it's there. And to let us know it's there, there's an ellipsis, the 3 dots at the end of the heading. That appears whenever a heading, no matter at what level, top level, second level, etc., whenever that heading has subcontent and that content is collapsed. Now, usually you're probably going to collapse all of your headings to start and then just expand the ones you need as you need them. So to show you real quick, I'm going to hit Shift and then Tab a couple times, and we're going to see that there's a lot of data in here. And to leave it open like this would be distracting to both you and me, so we're not going to do that. So I'm going to hold Shift and hit Tab a couple times, and that's going to globally collapse all of the headings in this file. So now we see some of them, like top level heading with subcontent. That's got the 3 dots. We know that has subcontent. Whereas something like what is Emacs, that has no text underneath it. Now we can expand a heading if our cursor's on it anywhere on the line. Could be in the middle, and hit Tab, and that will expand the children. So all of the children of that heading will be expanded. If we hit Tab again, then it expands the entire subtree. We can also do this if we move down to a child heading and hit tab. We can expand the children or all of the subtree. So now you see top level heading with subcontent no longer has the 3 dots to indicate there's no folded content because it's entirely unfolded. You can also see what the headings look like at different indentation levels. So that is a huge feature for being able to work in a file that has a lot of information in it. Okay, so I clicked on the next heading and I hit tab, and that expanded it. So you should definitely look at the compact org mode guide. It's shorter than the manual, but it briefly goes over all of the major features in org mode. So you can go to orgmode.org, and there will be a link there to the compact guide, and that'll get you started. It'll give you keyboard shortcuts, etc. I have also developed my own reference file, which I call my Emacs KB, which is where I have a bunch of shortcuts written down that I learned via the compact guide or the manual that's on orgmode.org, and things I use frequently but may forget, and then eventually I have them memorized, but I write them down. So you may also develop your own. At first it may be a heading in your main notes file, then later you may move it to a separate file, whatever. So I'm going to move down to the org mode features heading. We see there's the ellipsis there. I'm going to hit tab, and that's going to expand the children, but notice the children, some of them like lists and time tracking, those show there's folded content underneath. We'll expand those when we get to them. One of the features of org mode is there's shortcuts for everything. Technically, your hands never need to leave the keyboard, but that just depends on how many shortcuts you can stuff in your brain. I do sometimes use the mouse, although once you do something with the mouse a couple times, you may think, you know what, there's probably a way to do this without the mouse, and there usually is. So we covered the concept of an outline heading. There is a feature in org mode for lists. I'll hit tab on this, and that expands. We get both ordered and unordered lists. Ordered lists look like this. You put 1 dot space and you type item A, and then that list will continue. Now, when you're building a list, whether it's an ordered or unordered list, say I've got my cursor here on item 3, and I hit enter, it will continue that item. So I can put notes underneath that item, and it's not until I hold down Alt and hit enter that I would get a new heading. Now in this case, it's given me a new one at the parent level. If I had my cursor here on item 3 and I hit enter, then I would get another entry in this ordered list. Now another feature I want to explain since we're here is that you can reorder these lists very easily. You don't need to copy and paste the text to a different part. If item D really should be at the top, we can just hold Alt, and then when you hold Alt, you can actually push up, down, left, or right, and that's going to move it up, down, or indent it or unindent it. So that's something to try out. So I'm going to hold Alt and press up a couple times, and that moves item D to the top and keeps the numbering correct on that list. So that list, the numbers next to the items are in the correct order. Item D is no longer item 4, it's item 1. An unordered list starts with a plus, a minus, or an asterisk. So any of those would work. You could have an item and you hit Alt and then enter, and then you get another item, you hit Alt and enter, you get another item. Same as we have these bullets for the unordered lists. So we can have item here, Alt and Enter, and we'll have another item. And we may have a lot of text on this line and may even run a couple new lines in here. But when we're ready to get the next actual heading, Alt and Enter will give us another heading. Okay, let's collapse lists. Time tracking. So the two features I'm going to show are time entries and clock tables. And actually what I'm going to do now is what you can do is, however your notes are organized are up to you. But any heading, now it could be, you can clock into that heading. And then when you're done, you can clock out of it. And underneath that heading, you'll get a list of all the time you spent on that heading. So, org mode features. Let's say I wanted to track my time spent explaining this. I could clock into org mode features, and then I would get a time tracking entry underneath this on the next line. Now, if I wanted to be more granular, I could maybe clock in and out as I explained lists, as I explained time tracking, as I explained folding, which we already covered, some simple markup. It depends. Now, if I did clock into the subheadings, when I get a clock table report, I would be able to see my time down to as many levels as I want, down to these children as well as rolled up to the parent. So, or I could just not do time tracking in line with my notes. I could put a separate entire heading. And this extra space that got inserted, I believe, is a bug resolved in a more recent version of org mode. I type time tracking, I hit Alt Enter, and there's this extraneous space. I just backspace over it. It doesn't always appear as you see. So I could have a separate heading for my time tracking. I'd say Project A, Task B, some other thing. And I could track under these. It's up to you where you want it to look, how you want it to look. Obviously, you can copy paste the time entries around if you decide later you don't like it, and when you rerun your clock table report, it will update. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just clock into Project A. And the shortcut for that is Control, hold down Control, and while you're holding Control, you hit CXI. Now we get a logbook entry, and we've got an ellipsis at the end, so we know there's collapsed content. We can hit Tab on that, and we've got a clock entry showing when the clock started. I'm just going to let that run for a while. The other thing, which I'm not going to show directly, are clock tables. Let's see in here. There's actually another feature I want to cover in this list. I'll cover it under multiple buffers. Okay. So clock tables, you can find this in the manual or the compact guide. It's a way where Emacs org mode will scan your entire file. It'll look at all your clock table entries, and it'll give you a report of how much time is spent. So if I have 100 clock table entries for Project A, it'll tell me actually how much time that amounts to. And just for fun, I'm going to clock out of this Project A now. I'm going to hold down Control and hit CXO. I remember that because the last key is I. I for clock in, O for clock out. Now you can also adjust these entries. If actually I started this task at 14:30, I can hold Shift and adjust this if I want. I can adjust any of these. I could, say I actually started that a little while ago. You could type in a different number if you wanted. And then we have the duration that automatically updates here, and we can collapse that if we want. Clock tables are great. You can have several clock tables in your file. You could show time spent this week. Another clock table that looks at, gives you a report of time spent this month. And then, Each one of them is independent, and there's a keyboard shortcut to update all of the clock tables in your file. Folding I already covered. Simple markup. Let's hit tab. All right. So we can use asterisks to make text bold, forward slashes to italicize text, an underline mark to underline it, and then a plus sign to strike through text. Don't really have a need to do this personally, but it's there. Okay, multiple buffers. So you're going to probably love this feature. Right now, we've got just one file open, and files are called buffers. So when I got started with Emacs and org mode, I started building my own personal Emacs KB where I would jot down shortcuts that were things I used as I used them. So I have that file open right now. It's not displayed, but it's in the background. And I can click the buffers menu to open it. Now, I don't think this will show up in the presentation or in your recording, but I'm going to click on the entry for my other file. This is my Emacs KB, and it's actually all of the headings are expanded, and it's not very nice to look at. So instead of this, I'm going to do a global collapse. I'm going to hold Shift and hit Tab, and that's much better. And so this is all of my headings in this file. I've got different things jotted down about tables, text editing, and copy paste, which is called by a different name, searching your file, customizing the way Emacs runs, and buffer stuff. So now if, let's say I was going into this file and I want to look up a shortcut or something, and then let's say it was in this section, and I had tab to expand that, and I found that shortcut, I might flip back. I could click buffers, and I go back to my other file. But my hands are leaving the keyboard to click on a menu, and you don't necessarily need to do that. If you've got these different buffers or files open, you can just hit Control X and then left or right. So I'll hit Control X, and then there's my file, my Emacs KB that we just had open. Now, that's great to be able to switch from files, but sometimes I want to be able to look at it at the same time. So there's you can have many files open and all displaying at the same time. We could have 2 copies of this same file open, scrolled to different lines if we want to be referencing 2 different parts of this document at the same time. Maybe we can type in either window or pane, however we want. You do that by hitting Control X and then 1, 2, or 3, and just play with that. Hitting Control X and then 1 will return you to this view, which is a single pane. Control 2 and 3 will open buffers side by side or top and bottom, and you can have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 buffers open simultaneously if you want. But I'm going to show you what happens if you hit Control X and then 3. So what happens is it shows us the same buffer over on the right. Now, I'm going to add some text here on the right. You'll see it apply. It shows in real time on the right. I'm going to hit Alt and Enter, and then Alt and Right to give me a child heading. And I'm just going to write a little comment in there. And actually, maybe this is useful, but maybe what I actually want to see is that other buffer I've opened, my Emacs KB. So I could either go up and click the buffers menu, or I just put my cursor in the pane that I want to change and hit Control X and left or right. And then now I see 2 different documents, and I can kind of reference them at the same time. Okay, so let's see what else we got. Tables. Okay, org mode has table functionality. So here's got a table. This is from, I think, the manual or the compact guide. To start a table, you just put a pipe, you put something, and you put another pipe, and then you just put a couple headings, right? And then you put an ending pipe. Then you hit enter, or tab rather, not enter, but tab. And tab moves you to the next line. Now you can put some data in here, and I'll put data and I'll hit tab, and that moves me to the next field, or cell rather. I'll hit tab again, I get another. And then sometimes, it's just, you put a lot of data in a cell, and when you hit tab, it automatically stretches or collapses that column. Now up here in this table, I might say, I want another column here. And there's a bunch of shortcuts that go along with manipulating tables. I'm just going to show you some basic stuff. But let's say I need to know not just name, phone, and age, but maybe I also need to know country. Okay? So I'll put that in, and I'll put a pipe, and then I'll hit tab. And then it fills out the rest of that text. And this is just plain text, and we're just being assisted in manipulating this plain text. And we can put some data in here, and we'll put A, and then we'll go down here, we'll put B, and oh no, that's not aligned. Well, I can just hit tab. There we go. Now, we also might say, okay, hold on. We want to put country as the second column, not the fourth. I believe the shortcut for that, I'm just going to hold Alt, and hit left. I'll move that column over to the left. And maybe I want this second entry here to be moved to the top of the list, so I'll just hold Alt and up, and then I've got some rearrangement and manipulation of that table. There's a lot more that these tables will do, and a lot more ways to manipulate them. Look in the org mode compact guide. Moving headlines. I think I already said that. You could, if I got my cursor up here on time entries and I hold Alt, I hit right and it indents it more or less. And then I can also move it up and down by hitting Alt and up and down. The last thing that's super useful is, let's say, for example, we'll open this up, and let's say that we want to make ordered indented. So it's going to become a child of something else. So let's say we've got another heading, and we actually want to make ordered a child of another heading instead of at the same level. Well, normally if I hit Alt and right, okay, that works. Let me add, let me see, another heading. Let's see, another, and one moment. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so you can also hold Alt and Shift, and that will move not just the heading that you're on, but also the children. So you might want to promote a child like this to be to the left. You may want to demote it to the right, and you can do the same thing if you want to move, depending on if you want to move the heading itself and its children or not. So that's either Alt and left and right, or Alt Shift and left and right. Okay, to-do list. This is a great feature. So in an item, and I'm just going to put an entry here, I'm going to hit Alt and enter. Now that gives me another item at the same level as that to-do list heading. Alt and right, and I'm going to get a child entry. So Making a to-do item is as simple as typing to do, and it immediately changes to red, and then we can put something in. If we have an existing line and we're anywhere on that line, we hold shift, and then we get a bunch of options when we hold shift. When we hold shift and use left and right, we can put some metadata with this this text. So I'm just going to show you to do and done. So we hold shift and right, it makes it a to do. We hold shift and right again, or go left, it doesn't matter. It changes to done. So that's how we can make to-dos and how we can mark them as done. I've also added a line into my Emacs initialization file that when I mark something done, it puts the date that I closed that task in. And that's useful because I may want to know when I completed that task. Now, if later maybe I want to mark that back as undone because, for example, I find out there's more work to be done or something, I'll just flip it back, hit shift right or left, and notice that that line that says done has disappeared. So that's something to be aware of. You can also schedule to-do list items. Scheduling would be if you say, okay, I want to do this next Thursday. And a deadline would be, let's say it's due on Friday. So those are a little different. And then what you can do, and I'll show you this over here. Okay. If you hit Control and then CD, then you'll see a calendar appear. And you use the arrow keys to choose a date. You may have to hold shift, not sure. But you choose a date on the calendar and that sets a deadline for that item. So for example, I have done this already for this heading that says deadlines. And so if I hit tab, then the deadline is folded text underneath and we see there's a deadline there. In the same way, I hit Control and then CS, and that scheduled this line. Now this line isn't actually a to-do list item, it's just a line. But it doesn't matter whether it's a to-do list item or not, technically, you can still schedule it. There's some other shortcuts you'll discover. You may say, well, if I bury these to-do list items deep in my file structure, like say if I collapse org mode features, I wouldn't remember there's a to-do list item deep down in there. Org mode can scan through your file and either show you all of your to-dos or only expand the parts of your file that have to-do list items under it. And those shortcuts are these two, Control C and then A and T, or Control C, a / and then T. Those work differently. Try them both. You'll see how they show the content a little different. Decide which one you like better. Since we're talking about scheduling to-dos and to-dos, and I'm going to re-expand this, and well, yeah, there's a lot of features I'm skipping over here. Let's talk about archiving now. So because I want to talk about this before attachments, I'm going to put my cursor on this line, hold Alt, and then up. Okay, so archiving, eventually your file will get a lot of data in it, and it's going to become difficult to manage. You're going to be putting notes in here all the time. You're going to be putting to-dos that become done, and eventually your file will have a lot of to-dos that are done and a lot of notes you don't need anymore. So you don't have to manually clean it up. you can use the archiving feature. I'm going to go over here and hit tab on archiving. Okay, so this shortcut, you hold Control, and then you just tap out UCXS. And if you do that 10 times, you'll suddenly remember it for no explainable reason. So Control UCXS will launch the archiving feature from wherever you are in your file. So you probably want to move your cursor to the top of the file, I believe, so it starts scanning there. And what it's going to do is it's going to check to see if any children and it's going to start at these top level headings. And it'll put the cursor there, and there'll be a question at the bottom of the Emacs window, and it'll say, do you want to archive this heading? Yes or no? Well, it's smart enough to look in that heading, and if there's a to-do item underneath that heading, by nature, to-do isn't done. If it was done, it would say done. Just like we see here. We see something is to-do, and this thing is done. And I actually haven't done this, so I'm going to hold Shift and hit left and mark that back as a to-do. So when you archive, it will highlight this first entry. It'll say, do you want to archive? You can say yes or no, and then it'll move the cursor down to the next item and say, do you want to archive this? And it'll continue to offer to archive each of your top level headings, which includes their content, until it gets to the end of the file. It will skip over any top level headings that have undone to-dos, so that, and it may do that for scheduled or deadline entries. I haven't tested that, but it'll skip over things that you have undone to-dos, because if you have undone to-dos and you archive it, you're probably never going to get around to it, or because you won't be aware of it. For more information about archiving, you can read the compact guide. I archive into a separate file. So it just moves the text to a separate file. I can always go in that file and re-reference that old data if I need it. But I'll look at a tree, and a tree may have maybe a bunch of, if it offers, I'll say, oh yeah, that was a bunch of things that I did, don't need those notes. And obviously, because it's selected that and offered to archive, I've done all the to-do tasks under that. And so I'll archive some things and keep others around for a certain period of time. Okay, so attachments, I'll hit tab on that. Attachments are a way of attaching any kind of file to your notes. So again, we're keeping everything in plain text, so we can't put something in this file that's like, say, a multimedia file. But what we can do is put a file in a folder on the file system and reference it. And that's great because that's a platform agnostic thing. And what we've got here is this properties drawer. And then we've got the three dots to tell us it's collapsed. I'll hit tab, it expands. And so when we hit a key combination, let's go over here to attachments. So if we hit Control-C, Control-A on any heading, we will be offered an option to attach. So what will happen when you hit Control-C, Control-A, then you need to hit F. F will open either it'll make a new attachment folder for that heading or open the existing attachment folder for that heading. So this heading already has an attachment folder, and if we look in the same folder that this file is in, we'll see a folder called data. And now this is where it may look a little different because this file is this way of organizing attachments has changed, I believe, in newer versions of org mode. In the version I'm demoing today, it works like this. We get a UUID, and you'll see a data folder in the same folder as the file that we're editing is in. Inside the data folder, we'll see a bunch of folders that have, and I'll just highlight this, 2 characters, and we'll see one that's got AF as the name of the folder. And if we open that, then it will have the remainder of the UUID as a subfolder. And when we hit Control AF, when our cursor is on this attachments, it's just going to open that folder. And that folder is dedicated to this headline. We can drop any kind of file in there, spreadsheets, images, other text files, binaries, whatever we want. And then it's going to be referenced by this. There's other features around attachments, but that's some basic functionality. I'm not going to show opening the attachments because it won't show up in the screen recording, but you can try it out. Control AF. Okay, links. Links. You can have internal and external links. You might want to link to a website, or you can actually link to a different part of your document, which is sweet. So let's cover external links first. So I'll hit Alt and up because I want to talk about that first. So external links, we're going to give an example. We'll hit Alt and Enter, and then Alt and Right. And so let's make a link to a website. So we're going to put, let's expand links here. There we go. There's some information about links that you can read through while I've got this open. Okay. And so external link will give a website address, example.com, and we'll put that inside of a pair of brackets, and then we put a description inside of a pair of brackets, and then we put the whole thing inside of a pair of brackets. And when we add the final bracket, then it becomes a link. And we can hit a keyboard shortcut to open that link, or we can click on it with the mouse and our browser will open and we'll go there. We can also edit that. If I hit backspace, it deletes that trailing bracket, and I could edit the description and re-add that trailing bracket. Okay, internal links. This is super cool. Okay, I got to do item here to replace with internal link to additional second level heading. Okay, so let's do this thing. So what we're going to do is there's 3 different ways at this time to create internal links. Go and read the org mode compact guide because it talks about them. And you can put basically a anchor in your file at a specific place like this. You know, like say this heading right here. I can put an anchor called my custom ID. It could also be called dinosaur, whatever. And then I can link to it like this with 2 brackets and then the ID. So that's like a very descriptive, explicit way of creating a link. You can also create a link that just searches your file for some text, which is kind of maybe the lazy way, and could work well for you as well, depending on what you want. So I'm just going to use a searching type link. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put the text I want it to search for, and it's got to be exact, inside of double brackets. Okay, so now we have an internal link. When I click this, it's going to search my file. This is not the only way you can build an internal link. I just mentioned you can create this specific anchor here with this properties tag on a heading. But if you just create just a link like this, 2 brackets and some text, it's going to search the file for that. So I believe this is a line of text in my file. I click on it, and my cursor moves up to show that line, which it searched the file for, and there it is. So if you've got some notes deep in your file, you may want to put at the top maybe like a couple jump links where you can jump down deep into your notes. The other thing, we're going to go ahead and collapse that heading, and I'm going to click this again. Notice this. this heading here has, we'll do another heading. I'm going to add a heading. I'm going to add in some other headings. And so look at this. This is interesting. In this version of org mode, if I expand this heading, I've got, what, 5 or so different headings. But if I click this jump link, it's not its name, it's just what I'm calling it. Just the one that contains the heading I'm interested in opens. And that's great because then it only shows me the actual heading I'm interested in, which is, I mean, it'd be fine if it just expanded where it was and scrolled to it. But the fact that it doesn't even show the other ones, this is interesting. So you see 1.5 and we've got the ellipsis, and we can expand that and we get all this other stuff. It's just pretty clever how that works. I'll mark that done. Crash recovery. Yeah, Emacs might crash on you. So the crash recovery works well. Once you have a file and you save it once, Emacs will always be writing your changes to the file, your unsaved changes, to a separate file. And then that file will have all your work in it. So you'll have 2 copies of your file. The one looked like what it looked like when you originally opened it or last saved it, and then all the work that's happened since you last saved. When it crashes, you can just have it open up and recover from that unsaved changes file. Now, if you have many files open, you can recover all of them at the same time. And you could have 20 files open if you wanted to. And if you have unsaved changes across all of them, you can do a global recovery by using, up till now I've just explained keyboard shortcuts, but there's actually a command line that you can pull up that you can enter some Emacs commands in. So if I hit meta X, which is Alt, so if I hit Alt and then X, then I get this line that says meta X, and I can type a command in here like recover session, and I hit enter. And then what that's going to do, I'm going to just hit escape, 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 because I don't actually need to recover my session because I didn't have a crash. But that will consider each of the files that you were editing during your previous session, and for each file it asks whether you want to recover that file, and you just say yes. There's another option I would recommend you look at. Let's see, let's go down here. I would recommend you'd look into desktop save mode 1. This is something you can set in your initialization file, and it will cause Emacs to, when you close it, remember all the files you had open and reopen them, which is great. I'd also recommend this here. You put these 2 lines at the top of your file. So you want to define startup indent. This causes it to hide the leading asterisks, which makes it look much nicer. That's why mine is not showing leading asterisks for indented headings, and yours probably is. I also like to define startup overview. And you can just put these 2 lines in your file, close and reopen it, and these are file specific directives. There's an equivalent that you can actually put into your Emacs initialization file, which causes it to do these 2 things or anything else for all files you open. I just stick this at the top of my files, the startup indent and startup overview, because I don't know, I have different copies of Emacs if I'm going to have the same things defined, and I want this one when it opens to have everything collapsed like that. So that is the crash recovery. I'll hit Alt, Enter, and then Alt Right. And then what was that command again? Well, let's go look at it. Meta X recover session. You can read more about session recovery, desktop save mode, your initialization file, etc. in the compact guide. I'll just leave you with this one tip. Another thing you can do is line here, hold meta, which is Alt, and then X, and then type customize. When we enter, you'll go into a sub-process of Emacs, which will give you the ability to customize a large number of things about how Emacs behaves. And so that's where you could find desktop save mode. So you could go out on the internet and find how to put the correct syntax for desktop save mode into your initialization file, or you could use customize, which is part of Emacs, and just search for desktop save mode and then enable it with a button click in customize. And customize will update your Emacs initialization file. You may need to close and reopen Emacs to get your changes to your initialization file to take effect, because they take effect when Emacs is initialized. But I bet there's probably a command you could run to have Emacs rescan your initialization file and have those changes take effect immediately. I don't know, just theorizing. So I'll scroll up. That's an overview of some of the features you can use to get started with Emacs.